Welcome to the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast, presented by Vox DFS Firelines. Now, here are your hosts, Justin.
Stephon Gilmore go to the Patriots. Now they got Mike Gillislee go to the Patriots. Are they now just the farm club within their own division?
Greg.
He's one of these faux leading women. It's like, that's not Angelina Jolie or Jennifer Aniston. It's some girl that I would see at the Circle K. That's kind of Alshon Jeffrey.
And Ryan.
There is absolutely no reason why O.J. Howard should be drafted before Cameron Brate. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Skullroot, and with me tonight I have my brother Justin and our always interesting character Greg. Let's just put it that way.
Character. That's awesome.
Yeah, he's a character. Who always has an interesting comment to make. So, he's always got us in stitches. How's that? So whether he makes you guys laugh doesn't really matter, to be completely honest. He makes us laugh. So, and
whether it's appropriate or not,
that's always a little iffy, but
it's walking right down the middle of the road, I like to think.
So, all right. Well, we want to welcome you guys to the show tonight. We've got a few special things going on. We are talking about the rest of the NFL matchups that we did not cover in last night's show. That if you weren't listening live last night, you may have heard today either on YouTube or iTunes or something like that. And we will also be resurrecting from last year our Pick'em and Stick'em game. Justin will be kind of emceeing that with Greg and I making the picks. And we'll go more over the details of that game once we get there. We have a couple announcements to make. To start off, we are actually finally making the announcements of who won the shirts and signed jerseys in our download contest for our draft guide and leaving comments and stuff on the podcast. So in third place, Mark Cunningham, I know that he's a subscriber over at Vox. He gets the Skull King t-shirt, which really I think he won. I mean, he got the best prize of them all. And the other ones, these are email addresses. I didn't have the actual names, but I will be emailing these out. I don't know. I think it's at gmail.com, but Travis, a.k.a. T-Mac, won the signed Martavis Bryant jersey. And I don't even know how to – I mean, this one's almost like gibberish. G and HISUMIT2. Sure, we're going to go with that. Just spelled it out.
It's got to be Canadian.
Yeah.
Was that Ginsu MIT?
No, it's.
Oh. I thought it was like a combination of the legendary Ginsu knife and the advanced educational institution MIT.
No.
Be a smart and deadly person.
Yes, that's what I was hoping for. I'm disappointed.
So that was the winner of the signed Ajayi jersey. We will get those. We will make contact with those three people to get them sent out. To get those sent out to you guys in the next week or so. Our other big.
I thought we had arranged for a dark parking lot meeting to hand out those jerseys. Ryan, is that no longer the case?
Out of the trunk of a car?
Out of the trunk, yeah. We'll do that. The problem is we're up in Seattle, and I know for sure that one of these guys is definitely not in Seattle. So. Oh,
I was thinking the alley behind Leroy's. Never mind.
So yeah.
Are we still exchanging shirts at that point?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. So there's those. There's our winners there, and we also wanted to make the note that we are no longer on Podcast Garden. We have now moved on to Blog Talk Radio. And so eventually, once we feel like we've gotten to that point, we are actually going to try to go live on Blog Talk Radio as well. So we may be live in like 4 places all at once. And so I think that's it for announcements. Why don't we just go ahead and get right into the news? Looks like as of today, Danny Amendola is still not practicing today with still in the concussion protocol. Looks like for me that still spells a little bit of trouble for Tom Brady, just because the only wide receiver that he has seemed to show any familiarity with or any real connection with it all is Gronk. I mean, because he definitely didn't have it with Brandon Cooks. He didn't show much of it with Chris Hogan, and he's even had Chris Hogan for an extra year. So it'll be interesting. It's not like the Saints defense, though, is all that great. They got torched by Bradford, Diggs, and Thielen this last week. So,
well, I think it was, I think the Patriots game was really disappointing, but they were. It's pretty hard to overcome the show that is Mark Wahlberg's biceps. That I don't really. How much bigger can those things get? Because it's like a chest on each arm. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. So between that and the video that they had, and the trophy being out there, I mean, they just had a massive letdown. It was a terrible game, but I'm sure they'll figure it out by this week.
Yeah, think about Mark Wahlberg. He's a little guy, so I mean, it doesn't take it. It's a lot easier for little guys to get their muscles to bulge than it is for bigger, longer, lankier guys. So
this is true.
Moving on. Injury update: Bengals wide receiver John Ross is listed as questionable for Thursday Night Football. We figured that. We didn't figure that he was going to play yet. And Colts QB Andrew Luck won't practice today. Did not practice today. We kind of saw that coming as well. We don't expect Andrew Luck to be playing for at least another 3 to 4 weeks, maybe even another half the season. So, basically, this is kind of what we expected out of John Ross too. To be completely honest, as a Washington Husky fan, I kind of figured this was going to be happening with John Ross. So. Coach Pete Carroll said he is, quote, anxious to see, unquote, more of rookie running back Chris Carson. I think a lot of people are anxious to see more of Chris Carson. I believe Thomas Rawls is supposed to be back and ready for this week's game against, who are they playing? The 49ers. And honestly, even with a crappy O-line, the Seahawks should mow all over the 49ers. It'll be interesting to see how Thomas Rawls and Chris Carson run in that game, because Eddie Lacy's not getting hardly any carries.
Is he already done up there? I mean, it was that bad of a game last week, wasn't it? That's like worst case scenario.
It was horrible. 5 carries for 4 yards.
I don't know if he's done. I think the offensive line couldn't do anything. So I think if they're able to bring some sort of chemistry there, Russell Wilson was running for his life. I think that came from the very, very strategic game plan of the Packers, but I don't see Eddie Lacy as done. And if I were to have had Eddie Lacy on my team, I don't know if I would have dropped him just yet. You had to know there's a 3-headed or at least 2-headed monster there in Seattle. One bad game does not mean he's done. There are tons of first-round picks who had bad games who you're not looking to drop.
Oh, I dropped him. I dropped him, but I was also in a little bit of trouble. Last week, I didn't have Ajayi. Everyone on my team basically pooped the bed, so I just kind of cleared a whole bunch of space on the bottom of my bench and started fresh down there. So, moving on, Cardinals coach Bruce Arians said that Kerwin Williams will start against the Colts in week 2. They've brought back Chris Johnson. I don't think he will see a ton of carries. I think really it's going to be between Kerwin Williams, and a lot of the passing down stuff most likely will be Andre Ellington. But that's all that you're going to get out of Andre Ellington, because he can't seem to stay on the field for longer than 4 or 5 plays at a time if he has to take carries anywhere close to the middle of the field. Are you expecting, Greg? Are you expecting much out of Kerwin Williams in this next game?
I mean, the matchup is favorable. So if he's going to do well, it's going to be in this game. It's one of those games where you can see him maybe getting 100 yards rushing because the Colts are just a bad football team. Especially if the Cardinals get the lead, he's going to get plenty of opportunities, I would think, in the second half to try to run down that game. So he is a guy who in the past has had some productive games. A couple seasons ago, he did, put up some 100-yard games towards the end of the year when Chris Johnson had gotten hurt. So I think he does have the potential to produce. He is certainly worth a bench stash. I would probably take him over Eddie Lacy. In fact, I might make that move myself. I dropped Perkins to pick up Turek Cohen, but Lacy might be next, and Kerwin Williams. He's been a fourth string and practice squad guy, so he's not like the man, but he might be more productive than some people might think, and I think he's going to be far more productive than Chris Johnson.
Yeah, Chris. What do we call him? Chris John. Chris. CJAOL. He's dial-up speed now. He's no longer high speed.
If he still had his burst, they wouldn't have cut him.
True.
Yeah.
So, here we go. Okay, this is defensive, but Texans linebacker Brian Cushing suspended without pay for the team's next 10 games for violating the NFL policy on performance-enhancing substances for a second time. He's already had a 4-game suspension. What was it, his rookie year? This guy has made a Pro Bowl before, but he can't seem to stay healthy. How much do you think that this actually affects the Houston defense with him being one of the linebackers up the middle?
Well, the Houston defense is used to playing without him, so I don't think it really affects them that much. And I'm sure they have plenty of fallback positions for when Cushing's not in the field, which he finds ample reason not to be. I think that he's an immensely talented guy when he is on the field, but as rare as that is, I think they're just used to playing without him. The Texans' defense is relatively unfazed by it.
Okay. Jordan Howard was limited at Wednesday's practice with a shoulder injury, but he'll play. And then finally, the Giants have much more optimism this week about the chances of seeing wide receiver Odell Beckham on the field against the Lions. So that should be good for Eli, because Eli pretty much ignored Brandon Marshall in week 1, and so he'll actually have a target that he likes to throw to in week 2. So maybe then that'll actually give him the confidence to mix it up to throw to someone else. So we'll see how that goes for this next week. And it looks like that's it for the news and notes. So we will go ahead. Justin, do we want to do pick 'em and stick 'em now, or do we want to go over the games?
We can do that now, and then we'll go into more of the games kind of as the last segment of the night.
All right. So real quick, before we get into the games, this next section, our pick 'em and stick 'em section, is going to be, put on by the Play Draft app. If you love fantasy football, then you need to be playing on Draft. Here's how it works. There's no management. You just set it and forget it. Once you're done drafting, that's it. No trades, no waiver wire. Draft even takes care of the last-minute injuries for you. Drafts start every couple of minutes, so that you can join one right now. The best part is you can play for cold hard cash. Drafts start from just $1, so there's a draft from everyone. No salary caps. You play in a real live snake draft. So unlike DraftKings or FanDuel, there's no salary cap. You have to fit everything in. It's actually you're drafting in a snake draft against other people. Just like you play with your friends in a season-long league as well. So you can do it season-long, or you can do it week by week, where every week you draft a new team. Do this for a limited time only. All new players get a free entry into a real money draft when you make your first deposit. But you have to use the promo code SKFootball in order to do that. So again, go to playdraft.com/SKFootball in order to get your free entry into a real money draft when you make your first deposit. All right, Justin, you go ahead and MC this thing. Kind of remind our listeners of the rules for this game.
So this is going to be a year-long game that's going to be covering the entirety of the regular season of the fantasy football season. So there's going to be 13 weeks. It's going to be played between Ryan and Greg throughout the year. I'll step in for either one if there is a night where the others cannot attend. So an easy explanation of this is these are players. There's going to be 2 at each position. All of these players are owned in less than 50% of leagues, according to ESPN. So these are all players who are more than likely not on your existing rosters, and it's a fun game for us to figure out who we think will have a better week. This really tests the fantasy football knowledge / guts / strategy and gameplay of these 2 for this week. And so getting into the game, once again, I'm going to highlight each position and each player in those positions, and then they will alternate. Whoever picks the player, the other individual is stuck with the alternative. So to start, let's go with the quarterback position. And we didn't pick beforehand. Randomly, Ryan, pick a number between 1 and 5.
3.
Son of a
Greg.
4.
Aha! It was 4. For those of you who are watching on Instagram, for those of you watching on Instagram, you saw that it was 4. I was holding up 4 in front of the screen there, and so Greg will get to pick first. So at the quarterback position, we have Flacco versus Cleveland or Palmer versus Indy. At the running back position, we have Latavius Murray versus Pittsburgh or Jamal Charles versus Dallas. Wide receivers, you have Nelson Aguilar against Kansas City and Marquise Lee versus Tennessee. Tight ends, you have Kobe Fleener versus New England and Jesse James versus Minnesota. At the kicking position, you have Graham Gano versus Buffalo. And then Chris Boswell versus Minnesota. At the defense side, you have Rams versus Washington or Ravens versus Cleveland. Now, because you get to pick first, you get to pick whichever position you want to start. So if you really like one of these matchups or you really like to stick a particular person to Ryan at any of these positions, feel free to do so.
That's interesting. So this is my first time playing this game, so I'm sure Ryan's going to pistol whip me like a small puppy. But I'm going to go ahead and what were the running backs again real quick, Justin?
The running backs are Latavius Murray against Pittsburgh or Jamal Charles versus Dallas.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to go ahead here, and I'm going to take Jamal Charles versus Dallas.
Okay.
If anybody saw
Latavius
Murray, you know that Dalvin Cook's going to be getting the ball, and you're playing against Pittsburgh. So I'm sorry, but I am going to go with Charles. Charles looked pretty good. He was getting 5 yards a touch. Obviously, they're working him in slow, but he is at home. And I think that he could surprise this week. I certainly like him better than on the road at Pittsburgh. So.
Okay, Ryan. So now you've got to pick from one of the other 5 positions. Who are you going to pick or stick to Greg?
Oh, God. Who are the wide receivers?
Wide receivers are Nelson Aguilar or Marquise Lee.
And who are they going up against?
Nelson Aguilar is going up against Kansas City, and Marquise Lee is going up against Tennessee.
I'm going to go ahead and go with the wide receiver position, and I am going to go with this may surprise Greg. I'm going with Marquise Lee, and I'm going to give him Nelson Aguilar because I think last week Nelson Aguilar was an outlier, not the new norm.
Wow. Your generosity, Ryan, knows no bounds, sir.
I try.
So back to Greg, picking from quarterbacks, tight ends, defense, or kicker. Which position would you like to to make your selection for.
All right. Well, I, in this case, am going to go the way I always go, which is taking a quarterback high, Justin. And I am going.
You took him with your third pick.
And I am taking the Cardinals' only chance of winning a game the rest of the year, Carson Palmer, against the god-awful, lowly Indianapolis Colts, who made Jared Goff, look like the second coming of Norm Van Brocklin. He played for the Rams, I believe.
You can't use old references with a young crowd.
Jim Everett. How's that for current events, Justin?
It's like us. It's like Justin and I using the AOL reference. Kids under 25 don't understand that one. So,
okay. So Ryan,
I guess I get.
You get tight ends, kickers, or defense.
Oh God! Tight ends, kickers, or defense. Who are the tight ends? Jesse James and who?
Kobe Fleener.
Ugh.
Both scored a touchdown, at least in week 1. Both did not do well last year, but have come out of the gate hot.
Who are the defenses?
The Rams or the Ravens. Rams are facing Washington, or the Ravens are facing Cleveland.
I'm taking the defenses, and I'm taking the Ravens.
Okay, Ravens.
I get the old Browns. I like that. I like that matchup. All right. So now I have kicker or tight end. And so I got the Fleen at home against New England, right? Or I got Jesse James at home against Minnesota.
Correct.
Yes.
Ugh.
Come on, that one's kind of an easy one.
I'm leaning towards – I think I'm going to go with Fleener. I think we have to go with Fleener in this case. At home, New England's going to be looking to put up some points. New Orleans is going to be throwing the ball. So I think Fleener's more in play. I think Minnesota-Pittsburgh is a low-scoring game. So there's my pick.
All right.
You can have Jesse James.
I'll take the outlaw on that one.
And Ryan, you're stuck with kickers. Obviously, you always pick kickers last. Always pick kickers last. Graham Gano going up against Buffalo, and Chris Boswell going up against Minnesota. Both these teams going up against some pretty solid defenses, so the opportunity to kick field goals is there. Whether or not these teams will score touchdowns is yet to be seen in these games. But of the two, which would you like to pick, or which would you like to stick to Greg?
Well, I'm going to take Chris Boswell, and here's why. Because he owes me. After only being able to kick 3 extra points, 3 PATs, and not getting a single field goal, and hosing me in one of my leagues, I'm taking Chris Boswell because he owes me. So you get Graham Gano there, Greg.
The Great Gano, as he was known on the Flintstones, which these other kids also have not seen. Wholesome family programming, kids.
Yes, and so once again, to highlight each of your rosters this week, Greg, you have Carson Palmer, Jamal Charles, Nelson Aguilar, Kobe Fleener, the Rams defense, and Graham Gano as your kicker. Ryan, you have Joe Flacco, Latavius Murray, Marquise Lee, Jesse James, the Raven defense, and Chris Boswell. If I'm picking someone at this point, I got to give the nudge to Greg because of the quarterback position. I think this is a great, whether they're playing defense or not, I think this is a great week for Carson Palmer to bounce back because they need to throw the rock, which gives added value to Fitzgerald, which we talked about last night. And so that wraps up the first week of Pick'em and Stick'em. Ryan, back to you.
All right. So, actually, Justin, I'm actually going to throw this back to you because you actually have a different order of – well, no, wait. I've actually got them pulled up. Never mind. I've got them pulled up. So, we're going to go into kind of discuss the coming games for this next week. And we're going to jump into the next game is the Patriots and the Saints playing in New Orleans. Greg, who are the fantasy people that you are definitely taking in this game, and who's maybe someone that you're kind of fading off of for this game?
I'm all over Tom Brady. I mean, I'm all over either quarterback for this game. I mean, I think it just has the recipe to be, one of those games. I think there's a tremendous amount of pressure on New England to make up for the debacle that was last week. I can't see them losing 2 games in a row. Hell may have frozen over if that took place. So I'm looking for Brady to step up big time. I think Gronk looks a little bit better this week as well against that defense. I don't think they have a linebacker to cover him. And I think Chris Hogan this week looks good.
All right. What about here, Justin? What are you seeing from New Orleans on here?
From New Orleans, I'm still very, very cautious at the running back position. I would almost start Alvin Kamara above Mark Ingram. In looking at how the Chiefs beat New England, they did it with a very solid, versatile back. And I think Alvin Kamara is more of that than Mark Ingram. I still think they use all 3. I don't think there's going to be a definitive lead back in this backfield for quite some time, maybe 3-4 more weeks. I don't believe it will be Adrian Peterson because of his inability to catch the ball. But I really like Michael Thomas in this game, a big body with some speed to run down the field. Ted Ginn is also someone that I would look to start over Chris Hogan on the other side because of his speed. Once again, neither one of those 2 receivers have Tyreek Hill speed, but both of them can put on the afterburners and go. Gronkowski, this is going to be a huge game. I think Kyle Rudolph could have been set for a huge game if not for the fact that, or last week, if not for the fact that Thielen and Diggs were wide open and they just threw the ball a little bit deeper. I think this is a great bounce back game for Gronk. I wouldn't look to start Dwayne Allen because I just don't see them running two tight end sets. And then the kickers are both starters. Lutz had a great first week, and Gostkowski is the kicker for New England, so you got to start him.
Yeah, I think in terms of the Patriots, for me, it's I think Hogan can get it going. It'll be interesting to see how Cooks does going up against his old team. And again, with how bad the Saints were against the Vikings wide receivers, I think Cooks could absolutely light them on fire, especially going into New Orleans. And then in terms of the Saints, I think it's a coin flip between Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. I would be willing to start Ingram as a running back 2. Kamara more of a flex or a flex number 2 if you have 2 flex positions. Just because Ingram is a veteran who's been there and done it. Even though Sean Payton seems to hate Mark Ingram for some reason.
As much as he hates Adrian Peterson.
And so yeah, I mean, I think you sit and wait on Kamara another week. I know he's going to get used a ton, but I would wait another week. Okay, and and just quick side note on Adrian Peterson. Here's a note or something that I saw in one of my discussion groups. Greg, what would you think of the Cardinals trading for Adrian Peterson?
I was just going to say that is a move that I think you see happen in the next couple of weeks. I mean, unless Kerwin Williams really shows something, I don't think it's going to cost much to get Adrian Peterson. I think the Saints probably saw from Adrian Peterson what we all saw last year, which is not a very good running back. But he's a healthy body on a bench. Bodies are going down, and he does have trade value at this point. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Cardinals trade for him. There was always the fact that they passed on him in the draft in the first place. They couldn't woo him a few years ago to try to get him out here. So I would not be surprised at all if the Cardinals made that move.
Okay. All right. So we're moving on to the next game. The Eagles and the Chiefs. This will be in Kansas City. Eagles had a pretty good game last week against the Washington Redskins. Ended up really making a fool of Kirk Cousins. Playing in Kansas City, who, as we know, last week lit the torch to New England in New England. Justin, let's start with you. What are you looking at for this game?
What I'm looking at for this game is number one, off the bat, I don't see Alex Smith producing what he did last week. The Eagles are a much better defense, especially defending the pass, and they showed that last week against a very pass-happy, very good passing offense in Washington. I think Carson Wentz will outscore Alex Smith this week, although Alex Smith has some home run hitters in Tyreek Hill and Kareem Hunt. From the running back perspective, I would not feel comfortable starting a single running back whose name is not Kareem Hunt in this game, because I've said it throughout the entire offseason. I don't think LeGarrette Blount is viable this year. I just don't see him as an option unless he's on the Patriots team, because he hasn't really been an option. And last week he got lucky with a 1-yard catch for a touchdown. Other than that, he has 14 carries for 46 yards rushing. That's a bust week for a guy you look to grab in like round 5, 6, or 7, depending on your league. And so everyone loves Blount. I don't see it. The wide receivers, obviously Tyreek Hill will be the number one scorer. I don't see Alshon Jeffrey bouncing back from his option. This is more, I like the tight ends more in this matchup, both Zach Ertz and Travis Kelce for this matchup. So over the wide receivers.
All right, Greg, what do you got for this game?
Yeah, I think Justin summed it up just about right. I would not touch any of the running backs in this game, though. LeGarrette Blount at least did get the 14 carries, unlike one Wendell Smallwood who had 4 carries, and certainly playing against an Andy Reid team. There's the potential for Blount at least to get the touches, though they're not necessarily going to be overly productive. But if it's in the red zone, it could be. I agree with you on the passing game. I think Wentz is the more attractive option of the two, though neither one would be overly desirable. And definitely with you when it comes to looking at the tight ends, in this game. So I don't think it's going to be a particularly high scoring game. I think it's going to be a pretty physical game.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I think the tight ends are the best receiving options in this one. Tyreek Hill, I think, is the only wide receiver that I'd really, really want to have in that. And even with that, the Eagles have it like we said last week, earlier, have a pretty stout defense. I think they'd possibly be a little bit better at defending him than New England was last week. So, I'm not touching the quarterbacks in this one. Again, both these defenses are pretty physical. Kareem Hunt is the only running back I'm looking at. So, all right. So now we've got the Titans and the Jaguars playing in Jacksonville. Titans coming off a loss. Jaguars coming off of a pretty dominant defensive performance against the Houston Texans last week. Greg, let's go back to you on this one. What are you looking at for this game?
Well, I certainly think that we look for Mario to have a little bit better game, this week than he had last week. I wasn't able to really produce much in the way of points, against the Raiders. So I do think that's going to look a little bit better. I am concerned about what you did see out of Tennessee's running game, and so I don't necessarily know that looks all that much more attractive against this Jaguars defense. I mean, Calais Campbell just put up what we used to call a season's worth of statistics in a week. So at least he lived up to the contract that he just signed, because he just absolutely dominated last week, and he really made an impact, on that defense. So I don't think his presence, should be understated there. But I think if Mariota can have a better game, then you look for a little bit more out of the wide receivers. I think what Corey Davis did last week looked pretty good. So if I were going to take a wide receiver, it seems like Mariota might have some chemistry going with him. So maybe you look that way this week. It looks like Eric Decker might be too much of a risk. Delanie Walker looked good, last week. So I think this is another game that also could favor, a Delanie Walker type of performance. On Jacksonville's side, obviously you're not Allen Robinson's gone now. You got Marquise Lee, who's Ryan's pick to click, at wide receiver. But otherwise, I don't think there's a lot to like on that offense, that isn't otherwise known as Leonard Fournette. I certainly am not taking Blake Bortles.
Alrighty, Justin.
I really look for Mariota to bounce back in this game. He did throw a lot in the previous game. He threw the ball over 40 times, I believe. But what was really concerning last week was, like Greg had said, the running game. I think this is more of a bounce back game for DeMarco Murray. As much as last week they struggled, I think that's just first game blues. I don't see – they were one of the more proficient running games last year. Derrick Henry can be viable if they get up to a lead and then continue to kind of counterbalance with Derrick Henry running the ball. Other than that, I don't see him doing much quite yet in the season. From the wide receiver perspective, I'm heavy on the Titans side just because of who their quarterback is and the talent at wide receiver. I like Corey Davis and Eric Decker before I would consider any of the options at Jacksonville. I like Delanie Walker better than Martavis Lewis from Jacksonville. I think the number one receiver in this game is Corey Davis, not Delanie Walker like last week. And then the kickers are the kickers. It's just I think both of these teams are going to get into the red zone more than people think. I think both teams will score mid to high 20s in this game.
All right, yeah, again, I like Marquise Lee in the offense there. If I remember right, last year the Titans struggled in their pass defense, but were pretty good in their run defense last season. We'll kind of see how that progresses this year. I'm definitely thinking that Marcus Mariota is going to have a better game this week, and I luckily have Corey Davis on one of my teams. I had him on the bench this last week just because we weren't, he was supposed to be on a pitch count. They didn't know what to expect of him, and he ends up being the highest targeted receiver in the game. So I like Corey Davis to play as like a wide receiver 3, as a flex spot if you need to, and Delanie Walker as a tight end, low end tight end 1, high end tight end 2. And then pretty much that's it in terms of and then Leonard Fournette off the Jags. So Lee and Fournette are about all I'm going to take from the Jaguars, and then from the Titans it's Mariota, Corey Davis, and Delanie Walker. If you've got DeMarco Murray, yes, last week is concerning, but I think you still start him until it becomes more of a trend. It could just there were so many people that had bad games in week 1 from the running backs that I think for now, you take it as an outlier and see what, and just kind of give it a couple weeks to see what happens. So, okay, next game, Jets and the Raiders in Oakland. So, since there's not much to take from the Jets except for maybe Bilal Powell, and even he's not going to get much done because we saw last week that no one else can get anything done. So they were the entire defense of the Buffalo Bills was basically centered on stopping Bilal Powell. So who all are we taking from the Raiders?
You know what? Obviously, Derek Carr's in play. He's an every week starter, and I think there's no reason that you would not start him against the god awful Jets. So you run him out there. Amari Cooper was incredibly disappointing last week. Should have had multiple touchdowns. Can't catch the ball. So I would prefer Crabtree to Amari Cooper this week if I was going to take a wide receiver, because the Raiders should have hung them a hell of a lot more points on the board last week, than they did otherwise. On the Jets side, absolutely not. If you're even looking at the Jets roster, you're clearly confused on, what the Jets have on there. There's nothing to look at over there.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Justin, what do you got for in this game?
I disagree that there's nothing to look at on the Jets. Obviously, you're not going to look at the quarterback position. What's concerning is Matt Forte eating into a little bit of Bilal Powell's production, but that's more or less because they don't care about Matt Forte anymore or running him to the ground. They got to pay him $4 million whether he plays the full season or he goes and plays for somebody else. So this is really, I think, going to be his last year because they're just going to run him. Bilal Powell, I see beating his projection just because there's not much else. But some of the other things that are viable here is I believe Jermaine Kearse can be a valuable flex option depending on how things have gone for you. In week 1, he got 7 catches for just shy of 60 yards. And in PPR, that's 12 to 13 points, which outscored some other wide receivers who were taken in the first round. I think that outscores Michael Thomas from last week's game. And so he's now clearly the number 1 receiver, and that chemistry was developed over 1 week. And so I am not looking for any production from either tight end position. The Raiders kicker really scored because they got to the red zone and didn't finish. And so that's really why he scored a lot of points. It's yet to be seen whether or not he's still the number 1 kicker in the league after a week. But I do believe that there is some viable stuff there for the Jets. But obviously, you're going to start your Amari Cooper, you're going to start Michael Crabtree, you're going to start Marshawn Lynch, and you're going to start Derek Carr.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that for Cooper, what sucks about Cooper is Cooper has the opportunity. 5 catches on 13 targets this last week. He gets the ball thrown to him a ton, but Crabtree, especially in terms of the red zone, Crabtree is the better option. And you were able to get him, 2 to 3 rounds later than Amari Cooper. Marshawn Lynch has shown that he still has a little bit of beast mode left, has a little bit left in those legs after having a season off, and Derek Carr, can throw the ball all over the place, and he's got the weapons to throw it to. So. I see Jermaine Kearse as, again, more of a DFS value play than a season-long play for now. So, all right, moving on. We got a few more games to cover. The Dolphins at the Chargers. Dolphins are coming off of their Week 1 bye, thanks to Hurricane Irma going up against the Chargers, who tried to come back against the Broncos, and again, thanks to a blocked field goal or they managed to pull the Chargers and lose the game when they were trying to make it close, losing within 6 points. So, for me, I'll go ahead and start this one. For me, you're definitely going to start Jay Ajayi. Jarvis Landry, I don't know about. Now that we're in games, we haven't seen a game yet from them. And so you don't know what kind of chemistry he's going to have with Jay Cutler, but Devontae Parker has it because Cutler has already said that he thinks that Parker is a faster Alshon Jeffrey. And we know how much, Cutler loves throwing to a tall, fast receiver who runs those mid to deep routes as a gunslinger. So
are we going to call Devontae Parker a rich man's Alshon Jeffrey now?
It's a rich man's peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah. I think, honestly, I think that, we'll have to see how it actually plays out this week. But I like Devontae Parker. And as far as the Chargers go, Keenan Allen, he's still a target for Rivers as long as he stays healthy. Tyrell Williams proved to be the deep threat. He had, I think, the same amount of catches, or maybe one less catch than Keenan Allen, but had I want to say 20 more yards because Keenan Allen keeps running those shallow routes. And I think Keenan Allen, his presence is what's keeping Hunter Henry from being productive. Because Hunter Henry, again, ran those short middle routes last year when Keenan Allen was out. Now that Keenan Allen's back, I think that Rivers is going to focus on him instead. So yeah, I think Keenan Allen is a guy that if you've got him, go ahead and play him. I like Tyrell Williams as a wide receiver 3 that has the chance to score a couple deep touchdowns. And then Rivers is going to sling the ball around. He's going to throw 2 or 3 touchdowns, but he may also throw 3 interceptions. So.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. I have already dropped Hunter Henry in one of my leagues, simply for the fact that I think they threw it to him like 3 times, but
no, he wasn't even targeted.
And that's even more concerning. And here's why. Because the Broncos defense has talent at the corners. So most people believe that you're going to attack them through the middle with your tight end to try and open things up. They didn't do that at all. I think Gates had a catch or 2 for less than 10 yards. So there's not much production there. I don't like the tight end situation at all right now. But Antonio Gates has the history with Phillip Rivers to make him someone that I would keep over Hunter Henry. But really, I don't like the tight end situation there. Obviously, Tyrell Williams, even with Keenan Allen back, is still a very viable option as the deep threat. Once again, I'm a big buyer in Phillip Rivers this year, so I believe that you will still have value in both top receivers every week. Melvin Gordon did get a touchdown. I'm not as high on him as most others. But I would definitely – here's what I would say for Jarvis Landry owners to talk about the Miami side really fast. And this will be my only comment because you've covered the Dolphins very, very well here. I personally didn't draft Jarvis Landry, but I would be nervous to even start him at this point. And that's because you have the wild one in Jay Cutler, who is one of the most inconsistent quarterbacks in the league, who really has only developed chemistry with Devontae Parker. And in the last preseason game, in the preseason game that he played with Jay Cutler, I think he had 1 target. So he obviously is looking to hone in and have laser vision on Devontae Parker. I don't know how much that leaves for Jarvis Landry in a team that's still going to rely heavily on the run.
Yep. Greg?
I don't know that I have much to add that you guys didn't already cover. I think you got it, on both sides. Again, Melvin Gordon, I think, shows why last week he is not and probably shouldn't have been, an elite running back choice. Guy's averaging 3 yards a carry. I don't know that gets any easier in this week's matchup. Phillip Rivers is a startable quarterback this week, but yeah, you are going to have the turnover issue. So whether you get the 2 to 3 touchdowns and the 1 to 2 interceptions is the big question on how that's all going to play out. And then I think, Williams and Allen are obviously both guys that you can start, at the wide receiver position. I'm obviously never going to start Jay Cutler in a fantasy football situation. That hasn't changed because he changed the color of his jersey. And I'm certainly not going to start him with his first game, being on the road, albeit probably in front of a 1/3 full stadium in Los Angeles for a bunch of people that never cared about football 20 years ago when football moved out of the state, or out of the city. But here it is again for us to watch an empty stadium in Los Angeles.
All right. Moving on. The 49ers playing at the Seahawks in Seattle. With how bad the Seahawks played offensively in Green Bay, I'm looking for them to bounce back against a young, inexperienced 49ers team. Justin, let's go ahead and start with you on this one. What are you looking at for the Seahawks and 49ers?
First, I'm looking for a Russell Wilson to have 3 touchdowns, whether that's throw 2 and run 1 or throw 3. I'm really looking for Russell Wilson to have a great bounce back game. From the running back perspective, I'm I'm not looking to start Eddie Lacy. I'm not even looking to start Thomas Rawls because of the ankle issue. Carson's an interesting flex if you're desperate and have lost a lot of running back. If you had both Danny Woodhead and David Johnson, like several people that I know did, and basically want to quit all fantasy football already, that's an interesting play because he's still on most waivers, and they'll still look to run the ball. I look for I look for also a big game from a Jimmy Graham in his ability to lengthen the field, be the red zone target. They're going to be in the red zone. I'm not as sold on Tyler Lockett being as involved, even though he is the deep threat. I like Paul Richardson a little bit more than Tyler Lockett. But on the flip side, the only one I'm looking at here is not Carlos Hyde, is Pierre Garçon. And that's because they can be very, very creative in how they get him the ball, whether that is screen passes, passes down the field. They're going to look to get their best player the ball as much as they can. He is what I would call a poor man's Antonio Brown on a Steelers offense that doesn't have a whole lot of other weapons, because I don't necessarily believe in Martavis Bryant after what I saw in week 1. That may just be a bad week. But I look for them to try and get Garçon the ball as much as possible. Maybe 8 or 9 catches. The Seattle defense did struggle against the pass this last week, so who knows? I think Garçon has a good game. But I'm not looking to start Carlos Hyde. No.
Greg, what do you got for this one?
I mean, I would take Seattle all the way in this game. I mean, they're at home. It's very unlikely that the Niners are going to win here on the road. New system, new coach, just the talent that they have. It's not a very appealing matchup. Garçon is the most playable guy, I think, in this situation, but I certainly don't love him going against Seattle's defense. I don't like any of the running backs in Seattle. I don't like Seattle to actually put up a lot of points. I just think they're going to win the game. I think last week, if we look at our conversation between Carson Palmer and Russell Wilson and Eli Manning, we got 3 just dog ugly performances last week, and so who's going to come back and bounce back a little bit I think they all look better this week, but I'm not necessarily looking for this to be a game where anybody's putting a lot of points on the board. I think it's going to be ugly football.
Yeah, very well could be. I think for me, this is a little thing for Vox. I am probably going to be putting Chris Carson as a value play in a couple of the lines I read out for DraftKings for Vox, because I think that he is a very interesting play for this week. Other than that, you've got your standards. I think Doug Baldwin will have a bounce-back game again because the 49ers defense is terrible. So I think he can get a decent amount of targets and catches again. So, all right. Got a few more games. Let's try to fly through these. Redskins at Rams. Greg.
The Rams are actually playing a real team this week. So I think that, not that the Redskins looked fantastic last week, but, I mean, they were playing a god-awful Colts team. So Jared Goff is not going for another 3 bills, on Washington. I think Washington overall looks better. This week it's not like they're playing in front of a hostile crowd. They're playing largely in front of, friends and family and, a couple of stray bums who walked in there with free tickets at the last minute. So it's certainly not going to be the toughest environment that the Redskins will play in all season when they're on the road. So I will go with I think Cousins looks good. I'm going back with Pryor again this week. Rob Kelly looked like absolute garbage last week, so I'm going to stay away from him. Todd Gurley looks borderline, serviceable. Didn't really see – I mean, Goff put up some decent numbers last week, but who are you going to pick out of that wide receiver core to actually go and get that? It's probably Cooper Kupp at this point, right, is who you're looking for. Because I think some of the Sammy Watkins contract year stuff has been diluted because of the trade.
Yep. Justin?
I actually am a buyer on Rob Kelly this week to outscore Todd Gurley. As much as I don't know what that really says realistically, because Todd Gurley, the game was literally teed up on a T-ball tee, and he swung 10 times and couldn't even hit the stick that the ball was being held on in his lack of ability to capitalize on a horrible defense. And so I look for same struggles from Todd Gurley. Rob Kelly, I think, has a little bit of a bounce back because they're going to continue to use the run as a way to open up the pass. I like Cooper Kupp, once again, to outscore Sammy Watkins. But I think Terrell Pryor is the number one receiver here all around, obviously the most talented. And I believe that Vernon Davis and Jordan Reed also become the number 2 and number 3 fantasy scorers from the catching perspective in this game. The only way that changes is maybe Chris Thompson jumps jumps Vernon Davis down a little bit. But I don't see a lot coming from Crowder, a little bit of an injury update, and Ryan Grant is too much of an unknown.
Agreed. I think Terrell Pryor, Cousins showed last week that he wants to get the ball to Terrell Pryor with 10 targets last week. So I'm definitely looking for them to try to do the same today. So, or do the same this weekend. So, and then as far as the Rams go, yeah, I'm Cooper Kupp is basically the only guy there that I'm really looking at using. So, all right, next Cowboys and Broncos. Justin.
I look for a very difficult game for Ezekiel Elliott. Now, granted, he's one of the better running backs in the league, but Denver's defense really did a number to shut down San Diego, and had it not been for some unfortunate turnovers, I think that becomes more of a blowout than the score actually represents. Dak Prescott did not impress me at all in Week 1 either, overthrowing Des Bryant a lot, not being able to hook up there. Trevor Siemian surprisingly looked well, but that also could be from the weak defense from San Diego. I think Trevor Siemian can outscore Dak Prescott this week. Ezekiel Elliott will still be the number 1 option at the running back from either team. But I would also think that Jason Witten is not going to produce like he did last week. Denver's a much tougher defense, able to really shut down Gates and Hunter Henry from last week. But I'll let Greg dive more into the wide receivers.
On Dallas, I think the lack of chemistry between Dak Prescott and Des Bryant continues, so I continue to stay away from Des Bryant. I think Terrence Williams looked decent last week, even though he was a little shaken up there. In the game, he ended up playing all right. So I think wide receiver wise, he's actually more attractive. Not that I'm going to take him in fantasy, but that's just what I think of Des Bryant. I think Jason Witten is actually one of the guys who's, if I'm going to take people on offense, I like Dak Prescott, I like Ezekiel Elliott, I like Jason Witten. Now, is Ezekiel Elliott going to hit 100 yards this week? I don't know. Tough to say. Probably not. But I think Jason Witten, right now is a guy that Dak Prescott's going to look for. Him and Cole Beasley are guys who are going to get balls. So I don't think there's a ton of fantasy viability here outside the wide receivers for Denver. I think if you look at Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, I think Simeon was really effective last week using them and, in combination 1-2 punch, the alternation that he had, kind of going between them down the field. He really showed something, I think, there. I still hate C.J. Anderson. I think he's terrible. I think Simeon, to Justin's point, might put up more points this week, than Dak Prescott. But I think Prescott, in his defense last week, looked like he did last year, which was, poise and in control, and a guy who's going to win football games.
Alrighty. Yeah, I'm pretty much with you guys on that one. I think that this is going to be a defensive battle in this game, to be completely honest. I think the Broncos wide receivers are your best bet there. And in terms of the Cowboys going underneath, whether it be Terrence Williams or Cole Beasley, I think is the best bet there. So, all right. Well, and you're going to start Zeke. So, we got 2 games left. The Sunday night game, the Packers at the Atlanta Falcons. Both teams 1-0 to start off the season. Greg, what do you got for this one?
This is one of those games that I think you have to look for some points being scored. So I think, both quarterbacks look good here, but obviously you're going to go with Aaron Rodgers, between the two. I think Matt Ryan did play well last week. Rodgers had a bit of a down week, not the greatest game, that he's ever had. So I think that he is in a better position to put up this to put up points, this week. I think Randall Cobb looked great. Last week, as did Jordy Nelson. So those are the guys that I would look at on Green Bay as far as wide receivers. And, the running back position, obviously, Montgomery's the one who's continuing to get the ball. I would have thought it was, Joe Williams, I think, or Jamal Williams. Jamal, I'm sorry. Jamal Williams, I was hopeful that you would see a little bit more, last week, but you just didn't. I don't know if maybe this week it is. I don't like the running back either way for Green Bay.
All right. Justin, what about you?
I'm a little nervous about the running situation in Atlanta. They struggled against the Bears last week. Devonta Freeman did get a touchdown, but they did not get a lot of yards. Obviously, they will not be as potent as they were last year, but that still has me a little bit worried. I'm still starting Devonta Freeman. He was more than likely your number one pick if you got him. I do like the running backs for Atlanta to outscore the Packers. I just don't know by how much. Obviously, Rodgers is your go-to. From a wide receiver perspective, I'm going to continue to believe that Randall Cobb will outshine Devontae Adams for the rest of the season. That was shown very, very clearly in Week 1. Obviously, Julio Jones, Jordy Nelson. I mean, this game is really primed for a huge fantasy scoring. So more than likely what's going to happen is this going to be like a 10-13 game. That's just how fantasy football works. I mean, you're looking at, even from the kicking perspective, you have top 6 kickers. You've got receivers that were taken in the first round, followed by complementary pieces that were obviously taken later. You've got running backs that were taken in the first and second round, quarterbacks that are taken early. I mean, you have a lot of stuff here. So more than likely there won't be many points scored. What I will say is you will not see the same production from Austin Hooper, obviously, but I do think he outscores Martavis Bennett just because I still don't believe Aaron Rodgers uses tight ends very effectively.
All right. And let's go ahead and hit up the last one. The Detroit Lions, the 1-0 Detroit Lions going into the New York Giants.
Brian, how about we forgot the Browns and Ravens, and then we can cover the Lions-Giants game for the first podcast next week.
Oh, yeah, we did. I thought we covered the Browns. No, we didn't cover the Browns and Ravens. All right, let's hit the Browns.
It's very ugly. It's going to be skippable. I mean,
yeah, this is all right. Browns and Ravens. Baltimore, their defense should mow over the Browns. There's not a whole lot of offensive things to look forward to with the Browns, except for Deshaun Kaiser because he can run the ball. He's a really kind of a younger Cam Newton. Really, is what he is. That hasn't been beat up as much. A big physical receiver with a big arm who can run the ball. We'll see how they use Duke Johnson. I wasn't too impressed with how they used him this last week. I think they used him. All of his snaps were in the slot. They only targeted him 4 times, only 2 catches. So we'll see how that goes. I think the Baltimore Ravens mow over the Browns with their defense, and their offense will do just enough to win. I think mainly it'll probably be mainly rushing the ball with Terrence West and Buck Allen up the middle.
Yeah, I think Buck Allen might be the number one running back option. Terrence West will pick up some of the pass catching ability with the loss there at the running back position. I think Isaiah Crowell does better than his projection, which is right now at around 11 to 12 points. Had a rough week 1, but I think he'll bounce back. They have too much talent on the offensive line. I'm not looking for hardly anything from either side on the wide receiver perspective. It's a crapshoot. I mean, Jeremy Maclin was viable because he caught a quick slant route, then he used his speed to score. Other than that, there wasn't much from either side here. Corey Coleman's obviously now the number 1 target. Kenny Britt was a pooper in week 1. There's not much here. And with not much here, maybe this is the game of the week. I mean, who knows? In order for that to happen, there would be a lot of bounce back across the board for that to happen, and I just don't see it. I think both of these teams are going to be bottom of the barrel. What saves Baltimore is their defense.
Greg?
Yeah, I concur. I mean, I think it's obviously Baltimore's game to win. I mean, this game is traditionally, every time these two teams meet, for as long as these two teams have existed together, it is traditionally a very ugly game. A lot of times accompanied by really ugly weather. So I don't know if that is or is not going to be the case this week. But, I think, Kaiser showed something. He is a guy who's going to be mobile. He is going to be able to get some points each week. So, in favorable matchups, that guy might be somebody who gets some playing time for people who don't have a solid quarterback option. But I don't think this is going to be the week. I think the most desirable guy, ultimately, if you're looking at the Browns, would be Crowell or Coleman. Over on the other side of the ball with Baltimore, I'm certainly never going to touch Joe Flacco. Or really anybody on Baltimore's offense. Their defense is obviously somebody, or is obviously a group that you want to go ahead and run out there this week. In a pinch, you go with Macklin, but that's a way. It's always a wing in the prayer with Macklin catching a long ball. If he doesn't do that, he produces nothing.
All right, so that's it for us. We will we'll cover the Detroit Lions and the New York Giants game, the Monday Night Football game, on Sunday night as we recap the Sunday game. So, all right, well that is it for us from the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast. A quick shout out to again Vox DFS. Firelines are our title sponsor. Make sure to go over to Vox DFS VOKSDFS.com. In order to get some help with your DFS lines with their providers and consultants. All right, well, that is it for us. My name is Ryan Skullrood, and with me tonight was my brother Justin and Greg. Thank you again for joining us, and we will talk to you guys later. Hey, Skull King Nation, thank you for listening to the Skull King Football Podcast. Did you like this episode? If so, be sure to go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube to subscribe. Also, please leave us a rating and reviews to let us know how we can better help you rule your leagues.